Hello and welcome to this NVTAC Quick Guide Microlearning on Veterans Program Letter, or VPL, 0624, Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program Requirements and Functions Appendix. In this microlearning video, we will be focusing on 4 definitions from the VPL 0624 Appendix: veteran, homeless veteran, veteran at risk of homelessness, and transitioning from certain institutions. As a reminder, for full details on eligibility, please ensure to review and fully understand VPL 0624 in its entirety. The first term we'll be discussing in this training is veteran. VPL 0624 provides the definition of a veteran as a person who served in the active military and was discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. It is important to note that the discharge cannot be dishonorable. An individual must have served in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Space Force, Coast Guard, or Reserve component, including the National Guard or Reserve. They must also meet the following criteria. They received a discharge or release under conditions other than dishonorable. They served at least 1 day of active duty, including basic training. They served on federal active duty as a National Guard or Reserve member, which does not include inactive duty or active duty for training, or they have a service-connected disability that resulted from an injury or illness incurred or aggravated during a period of inactive duty or training. Now let's talk about some key considerations and reminders regarding the veteran definition that we just went over. The first thing to note is that there is no minimum number of days of service required for HVRP eligibility. And as we discussed on the last slide, it's important to note that the discharge must be anything other than dishonorable. If an individual served during multiple periods and received more than 1 DD-214, having even 1 discharge that is other than dishonorable qualifies them, even if their most recent discharge was not favorable. If an individual is appealing a dishonorable discharge, they must be successful in that appeal before they would meet the definition of an eligible veteran. For National Guard and Reserve members, this definition covers any period of inactive duty or active duty for training during which they received a service-connected disability rating as a result of an injury or illness incurred or aggravated in the line of duty, and would need to show a VA summary of benefits letter to verify that rating. Continuing on with some more key details for veteran status, for National Guard and Reserve members, time spent in basic training or advanced individual training, or AIT, does not count toward meeting the veteran definition because basic training, or AIT, is considered active duty for training, which is not included in the definition of active duty. The term active duty for training applies to Reserve component members as well as to any other active or inactive duty for training, which means that training alone does not qualify National Guard or Reserve members or any individual as a veteran under 38 U.S.C. Section 101. Depending on the length of their federal active duty, some veterans may not have been issued a DD-214. In those cases, the grant recipient should include the applicable military orders or NGB Form 22. If a DD-214, VA Summary of Benefits Letter, military orders, or NGB Form 22 is not readily available at the time of enrollment, veterans can request these records from the VA, their military unit, or the National Personnel Records Center. For more information on reading a DD-214, please see the NVTAC Microlearning video, Reading a DD-214, which is linked in the description of this video. Now that we know what a veteran is per HVRP guidelines, let's move on to what homeless veteran means. A homeless veteran is a veteran who meets the definition of homelessness under subsection A or B of Section 103 of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. This includes individuals who lacked a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, those staying in emergency shelters or transitional housing, and those living in places not meant for human habitation. It also includes veterans who will imminently lose their housing within 14 days and have no resources or support networks to secure new housing, which we will discuss further in the next few slides. Under 38 U.S.C. Section 2021, this definition also applies to veterans who were homeless but obtained housing within the 60-day period before their enrollment in HVRP. Grant recipients must document the participant's homeless status at the time of enrollment to verify eligibility. Now we're going to dive into the HEARTH Act over the next 4 slides. The HEARTH Act defines a homeless individual or family as one that lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. It also includes those whose primary nighttime residence is a public or private place that is not designed for sleeping, such as a car, park, abandoned building, bus or train station, airport, or camping ground. The HEARTH Act also covers individuals or families living in supervised shelters or temporary housing provided by public or private organizations, including hotels or motels funded by government programs, congregate shelters, and transitional housing. It also applies to individuals who have stayed in a shelter or a place not meant for human habitation and are now leaving an institution where they temporarily resided. Grant recipients often have questions regarding homeless status for individuals who are temporarily staying with others or couch surfing, but do not have a permanent residence. It's important to understand that every temporary or couch surfing situation is different. For example, if an individual is staying on a family member's couch without a specified date that they will need to leave the residence by, that individual would not be considered homeless per the HEARTH Act. However, if an individual was allowed to temporarily stay on the family member's couch, but they are now being kicked out of that residence within the next 14 days, they would be considered at imminent risk of homelessness. If you have questions regarding a specific individual, please refer to the HEARTH Act, VPL 0624, and consult your GOTR if you have further questions. As we mentioned earlier, the HEARTH Act also includes individuals or families who are at imminent risk of losing their housing. It's important to note that only those at imminent risk within 14 days, not just at risk, would be considered homeless per the HEARTH Act. This includes people who own, rent, or live in housing without paying rent, share housing with others, or stay in rooms in hotels or motels not covered by government programs or charitable organizations. For someone to qualify under this category, there must be clear evidence showing they are about to lose their housing within the specified time frame. This might be a court order from an eviction, or it could be someone staying in a hotel or motel who does not have the resources to continue to stay there for more than 14 days. Credible evidence, like an oral statement from the person or family, can also be used to show they are at imminent risk. The individual or family must have no subsequent residence identified and must lack the resources or support networks needed to secure permanent housing. This section includes unaccompanied youth and homeless families with children and youth defined as homeless under other federal statutes. These individuals have experienced a long-term period without living independently in permanent housing and have faced persistent instability as shown by frequent moves during that period. They also can be expected to continue in that unstable situation for an extended period of time because of factors such as chronic disabilities, ongoing physical or mental health conditions, substance use, histories of domestic violence or child abuse, the presence of a child or youth with a disability, or multiple barriers to employment. The HEARTH Act also includes fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and other dangerous or life-threatening conditions can make a person or family homeless. To qualify under this category, an individual or family must meet 3 conditions. First, they must be experiencing trauma, a lack of safety, or fleeing from a violent situation in their current housing. This includes cases where the health and safety of children are at risk. Second, they must also have no other safe place to live. So if they have another option that is both safe and stable, they would not meet this definition. Third, they do not have the resources to secure safe and permanent housing on their own, meaning they are unable to afford housing or access support that could help them find a stable place to live. Now let's look at the definition of a veteran at risk of homelessness as outlined in VPL 0624. This definition helps identify veterans who are not currently experiencing homelessness, but are at risk of becoming homeless. As a reminder, veterans at imminent risk within 14 days are considered homeless, not at risk. At risk of homelessness applies to veterans who, when they enter the program, are at risk of losing their housing within 15 to 60 days. The definition also includes veterans who have been released from incarceration within the last 18 months and are at risk of homelessness. A veteran is considered at risk of homelessness if they meet at least one of the following conditions. Veterans who meet the criteria for extremely low income, veterans who receive welfare or public assistance, or veterans who are referred from specific VA programs, such as the Substance Use Residential Rehabilitation Treatment Program, Domiciliary Residential Rehabilitation Treatment Programs, Veterans Justice Outreach Program, PTSD Residential Rehabilitation and Treatment Program, or Compensated Work Therapy or Transitional Residence Programs. Veterans who are at risk of losing their current housing with no immediate alternative safe housing options that would prevent them from moving to an emergency shelter or another place described in the homeless definition are also considered at risk. This includes veterans who might end up in emergency housing assistance, safe haven, transitional housing, or places not meant for human habitation. To figure out if a veteran qualifies as at risk of homelessness based on the extremely low income criteria, grant recipients should use the most recent HUD income limits. Here's how you'll do this. First, go to the HUD income limits homepage, and the link to this resource can be found in the description of this video. Then, under the current year, click on the Query Tool tab and select the Click Here for Documentation button. After that, choose the state and county or the HUD Metropolitan Fair Market Rent or Income Limits area, or HMFA, that's closest to where the veteran lives. From there, look at the extremely low income limits category and pick the right number of people in the household, including the veteran. This will help determine if the veteran meets the income criteria for being at risk of homelessness. Next, we'll be going over the criteria for a veteran transitioning from certain institutions. A veteran transitioning from certain institutions refers to an eligible veteran who meets the definition outlined in 38 U.S.C. 2023. This includes veterans who are currently residing in a penal institution or an institution that provides long-term care for mental illness. Also, the veteran must be at risk of homelessness without the referral and counseling services provided under this program. Identifying these veterans early and connecting them to support can help prevent them from experiencing homelessness upon release. Let's go over a few details about veterans transitioning from certain institutions. For HVRP, determining whether a veteran is at risk under this definition involves factors deemed appropriate by the grant recipient. However, a grant recipient cannot determine that a veteran is at risk if they are not scheduled to be released from incarceration or an institution within 18 months at the time of enrollment in HVRP. It is important to note that veterans qualifying under this category do not need to meet the at-risk of homelessness criteria as discussed previously and defined in VPL 0624. A penal institution includes federal, state, county, local, and city facilities such as prisons, correctional centers, detention centers, reentry centers, penitentiaries, and jails. This concludes the microlearning on definitions from the VPL 0624 Appendix. As a reminder, grant recipients should review and ensure that they fully understand VPL 0624, HVRP requirements and functions. If you found this video helpful, please give us a thumbs up. Thank you for your time.